because we come from communities where the truth doesn't always reach the headlines, but it lives in what we face every day. This is changing trends and times, bringing clarity and context to the issues shaping our lives right now. No spin, no distractions, just real talk rooted in real impact. Now, are you ready to lean in and bring your voices into the conversation? Then, allow me to introduce to you a man committed to asking the questions that matter and breaking it down so we all understand. Your host, Charles King.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Changing Trends and Times. I am your host, Charles King, and we're going to be talking about some real serious issues here that I know that matters to an enormous amount of people, but I really want us to discuss this, and I really would appreciate the participation from each and every last one of you as we go through this wonderful topic of voting rights. The title of and the theme of this show is called Out of Bounds. And it's called Out of Bounds is because what we're doing today is we're going to be talking about voting rights in the sense of what's happening in primarily the southern states with all of this gerrymandering and taking away the voting rights for all people of color. Now, when we start, what I want you to know is when we're talking about voting rights is one of the most fundamental rights in our democracy, the right to vote. And right now, that right is under more pressure than it's been in decades. And so, as I give you a little context of this, is that for historical context, for most of you that do not know this, when the Emancipation Proclamation was put into place, and all people were freed, there was no more slavery. Then came into Reconstruction. When it came into Reconstruction, what was happening here in America is that Black people were voting like in record numbers, like you would not believe. And this was back in 1875. And in this case, what did transpire then was there were Black representation in many, many states, including the southern states, which were led by Black representation. And so at this point, where the country is getting so close to really being a real democracy, there was an actual insurrection that took place. Now, all of this is after slavery, just so you know, because voting rights were enacted and Black people were voting. Now, what happened then is with this insurrection, there were killing of many Black representatives. There was hangings, there was all kind of violence that was taking place. And so what happened then is that when representation changed and it became white, now it's known as, what they're saying is, the way it's always been, and that's not the case. So what happened is when all of this political discourse took place, it actually stripped Black people or people of color of their voting rights and all other rights here in this country. So as we just giving you that context, I just want you to know, here's a number I want you to sit with. In 2025 alone, 17 states passed 32 laws making it harder for you to vote. That is the highest number in a single year since anyone started counting. Now, the question that I have is why? And I want to know, for those of you that are actually understanding as to what is taking place, why do you think stripping people of color of their rights is the right thing to do? Now, with this episode, we're going to take this a little bit further, because what I want you guys to understand is that the power in voting has always been a part of Black culture. So what we're seeing today, especially with those that are saying that they do not want to vote, or they're not going out to do what's necessary in order to keep themselves in this place of wanting to vote, that's a problem. And the reason why that's a problem is because, the system has been turned so into a point that people just really, they do not want to vote. I can understand why they want to have that discourse, but you got to understand that when voting rights were reenacted and reestablished, as of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, there's a reason behind that. And so what we have to do now is we just have to understand what the power is and how the power lies, and why this is important when we talk about people of color. So more than 4.6 million Americans are banned from voting right now. Not because they aren't citizens, not because they don't care, but because of a felony conviction. And if you're Black, you are 3 times more likely to be in that number. Now, we already know that here in America, that when it comes to people having the opportunity to vote, and it's because we're real citizens. We are citizens of this country. It goes back to that context that I stated to you earlier about Reconstruction. And what is understood by that point is that factually, Black people or people of color are normally the ones that would always vote, because we always wanted to exercise that right to vote. What I want to do is, as I said, I want to take this a little bit further, is because I want to tell you guys where the power is when it comes to voting and why that's so important. But just some other things before we get into that is that there's still a bill that's working its way through Congress right now, the SAVE Act. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. And that will require documents 21 million Americans don't have. So I want you to think about that, because 21 million eligible citizens could lose their ability to register to vote due to the SAVE Act. 21 million. 21 million Americans could lose their right to vote if the SAVE Act passes. Now, they're going back and forth. They're fighting over this. And I think that it's not about them fighting over this. This is about true facts. And I want to say this, in this whole process, for those of you that want to have your comments, you can have your comments. But I will say this. There's one particular individual here that's in the comments or in the chats that states that Blacks should not be allowed to vote. Well, I'll tell you this, Harvard grad, top of class 1992. Since you feel that way, that's your right to feel that way. But I'm going to ask that you not put those kind of negative comments in these chats, because what you're talking about is totally nonsensical. Totally nonsensical. And so we're not going to get down in the weeds with you today. We will let you go ahead and have that comment, though. And I just wanted to read that out because I want people to understand. You see, it's people like that that's causing a problem right now in this country, because they Those kind of individuals are the ones that don't partake with their civic duties, but wish those that don't look like them use their civic duties. Then that's a problem. So I want to thank you all for everyone that's here right now. I appreciate you, and I want you guys to to know that I appreciate your support, and I appreciate you guys being here as we go through this wonderful content here. So today we're going to tell you exactly what's happening. We're going to show you the numbers, and we're going to talk about what you can do about it, because this is your democracy and no one gets to take it from you. So let's just go through this thing for what it's really worth. So as I mentioned before, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is one of the most important pieces of legislation ever signed in this country. It didn't just give people the right to vote, it gave the federal governments the power to make sure that right was protected. So now we're looking at it's the federal government that's actually trying to take away that right. Under this administration, of course, they're trying to create something that I don't think anyone knows of but themselves, about a total white race world. That's what it seems like they're saying. And so if that is what they're saying, then, that's a problem there. And I'll tell you why that's a problem is because when you can be, just when you think you have control of things don't always work that way. They don't always work that way. But moving on. Before the Voting Rights Act, states had a playbook for keeping Black people from voting. There was literacy tests, poll tax, grandfather clauses. It was legal discrimination designed to look neutral, engineered to exclude. Now, all of this took place, so we make sure we understand we follow this timeline. This is what took place after Reconstruction, after the first 10 years of construction where things were run under Black control, where the country was running smoothly, there was no issues, everything was great. Everything was great. But the violence and the upheaval that took place is what changed all of that. So now you have people saying that Black people never had the right to vote, and this is what the Constitution says, and this is why this was the way it was supposed to be. That's not true. That's not true. We don't talk much, and there's not much in the history books when it comes to the insurrection and the violence that took place from white people that killed an enormous amount of Black legislators on a daily basis. And because of the violence, where they got a chance to control the government, this is where we are today. This is where we are today. And so we have to think about this because it's time to move forward. It's time to not just tell the truth, but it's time to be about the truth. So let me give you one number that shows you the VRA's power. In Mississippi, before the act, Black voter registration was 6.7% within 3 years. That's within 3 years. It was nearly 60%. That's what federal enforcement looks like. Taking away voting rights. And you have states like Mississippi, South Carolina, that all had Black controlled legislators back during the Reconstruction era when we came out of this slavery situation that was controlling this country, build the complete foundation, which is what this country stands on today. That was because it was led by Black control that built this nation. But they refused to put that in your history book in high school to tell you the real truth, to tell you the violence that took place that took away voting rights from Black people. That actually happened, but it's not in your book. So if you go back and you want to find some sort of historical context on that, if you go back and you find the first part of Reconstruction in 1875, what you will find is that some of this, with the names of these individuals that was controlling the Congress, controlling the Senate, running this government, running it smoothly, you will see that that's a problem. And so to make it sound like it was a newfound thing during the civil rights bills of 64 and 65 that Black people just started to vote, that's not true. That is not true. And when they were voting at that time, Black people were voting in droves. I mean, just like the Barack Obama era voting that we saw, that's the way Black people were voting back in 1875. That is the way they were voting. So we didn't get here by accident. The 15th Amendment said you can't deny the vote based on race. The 19th said women get to vote. And the 24th killed the poll tax. The 26th lowered the age to 18. Each one was a fight. Each one was a victory. Each one of them was a victory. And so I just think that all citizens, as this I'm sorry if I say this wrong, but it's Florence Darling, 1911. I agree with you. All citizens should have the right to vote. All citizens should have the right to vote because, you know, if you're not a citizen, we're talking about something totally different. And I think what people are talking about when they say that is they're actually talking about immigrants that are coming from other countries that have been flocking here for years. And so I can understand when people say, you know, that something has to be done about that. I can understand that. I really can. Because if you're here illegal, then no, that's not right at all. But the thing is, I don't think that that anybody that's controlling the Congress or that controls immigration would have the right to say that, you know, if you're a white immigrant, you should be accepted. If you're a Black or brown immigrant, you should be denied. So that's not a fair basis either. So if they're going to fix the immigration system, then it needs to be fixed totally and whole. I understand that, but they're not doing that. And they're using that as an excuse to keep Black people in particular, especially from voting, because the voting block is always large and is always in large numbers when people decide to come out and vote. That's my premise. That's my point. But they're using all kinds of excuses to keep people from voting, and that is not proper at all. On March 7th, 1965, Bloody Sunday, John Lewis and 600 marchers crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. They were met with tear gas, billy clubs. That footage shocked the nation. 5 months later, President Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act. Now, there was a lot that took place at that time. There's an enormous amount of things that took place. And I'm sure that each and every last one of us have seen some of that footage at some point in time in our lives. Don't care how young you are, don't care how old you are. Most of us have seen that footage. That footage is not nice. Because when you see people have the opportunity to beat and kill people because of the color of their skin, you don't know these people, but this is what you have the right to do. And it's still happening today. It's still happening today. It's shows like this, and it's stories like this, and it's commentary such as this that has to shine this light, because people are simply sweeping this under the rug. They're not taking this seriously, because there are actually people today that still believe that Black people should be killed and not allowed their rights. How could that be? How could that be? It's one of those things that we all need to be thinking about, because this affects each and every last one of us here in America. Fannie Lou Hamer was beaten in a Mississippi jail for trying to register voters. She said, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." Her fight, and the fight of thousands like her, is the reason any of this exists. Now, the historical context of Fannie Lou Hamer is that she refused to be ignored or to be told that she was not a citizen when she knows that she's a citizen. But like so many that followed her and listened to the things that she had to say, they did what they thought was right, which was right. And they fought against that. And we're now here in the 21st century doing the exact same thing. That does not make sense. That does not make sense, because this goes down to an economic situation. It delves more into economics than anything, and we're going to get to that also as we go through these facts. The VRA had a secret weapon. It was called preclearance. Under Section 5, states with a history of discrimination couldn't change their voting laws without federal approval first. It was proactive. It stopped discrimination before it started. Preclearance. Now, for those of you that are thinking that you've heard that before, yes, you have. That was Shelby v. Holder. When Shelby County, Alabama, went to the Supreme Court to fight voting rights against the Department of Justice and Eric Holder, the Supreme Court struck down preclearance, struck it down, which was the first blow to voters' rights and discrimination. This was in Section 2, if I'm not mistaken. It was Section 2 or Section 3, but I think it was Section 2. And this started this whole snowball that we're having right now today. Shelby County, Alabama. And for those of you that don't know where Shelby County, Alabama is, I will tell you. It is on the backside of Birmingham of Highway 280, going towards Auburn. Yes, that's where Shelby County, Alabama is. For almost 50 years, that system worked. It blocked thousands of discriminatory voting changes. It was an umbrella that kept voters dry, and then the Supreme Court took it away. The Supreme Court took it away. They did. They allowed Shelby to discriminate. They allowed Shelby to redistrict. They allowed Shelby to take away any Black representation of that county. Any. So here's the question. These rights were won with blood and sacrifice. Generations fought, marched, and died for them. What happened next? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what happened next. because I'm sure most of us that are following situations like this know what happened next. But in this whole process, there is nothing, no one that is from a political representation or a community-led person that's actually spoken the way they need to be spoken about this, because this was the start of a serious discriminatory situation that we never could imagine we would be fighting against. This fight is long, it's hard, it's difficult, but it's also very nasty and dirty. Very nasty and dirty. So, June 25th, 2013, the Supreme Court handed down Shelby County v. Holder. In a 5-4 decision, they struck down the coverage formula of the Voting Rights Act. They didn't eliminate preclearance, they just made it impossible to enforce. So making it possible to enforce means they actually struck it down. So you can't have a gray area there. It either is or it's not. Chief Justice Roberts wrote that things have changed dramatically in the South. Justice Ginsburg responded with one of the most quoted dissents in modern history, throwing out preclearance when it was worked and is continuing to work. It was like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you are not getting wet. That was just being discriminatory and racist just because. And so for those of you that don't know about Justice Roberts has never liked civil rights. He's never liked the idea of Black people voting anyway. So anything that comes to him and this court right now, this biased court, is not going to be done from a real legal perspective. This is about personal feelings and how they view things. This is not about the law, because if it was about the law, then none of this would have never and would ever be taking place at this point. But we, the people, have got to do what we have to do, which means these people that we have sitting up there in the Congress and the Senate, especially the presidency as well, we got to get all of those folk out of there. There needs to be a total change, and real people from real communities need to be doing the people's work in Washington, D.C. Real people. Real people. I'm talking to each and every last one of you out there because you hold the power. You hold the power. You can't let anyone take that power away from you. You can't let anyone else control your power. You have the power. You have the say. You make the difference. This is what we lean on each and every citizen here in this country to do our due diligence. This is what we need to have happen. So I'll say to you, and I'll say it to you right now, do not let anyone take away this power, but we need to be unifying right now, because the changes that need to be made, especially coming up to this midterm, we've got to get this president out. We've got to get those folk out that Senate. We've got to get those folk out that Congress that are still sitting there and letting this man run roughshod all over the whole country and the world and getting into all these disputes around the country where there are no allies. We can change that. We can change that. So what happened after Shelby County? Texas moved to enact a strict voter ID law within 24 hours. Other states followed. The floodgates opened, and they have not closed. So just so we all understand what I'm talking about, we hear it every day that there's a new voter ID law. There's new voter law registration coming into play. There's everything that they're trying to change about voting. And why are they trying to change the vote and keep Black people from voting? That's still the million-dollar question. And I'm asking all of you that are out there, I appreciate your comments. You know, when you put them in the chat, please put them in the chat, because I think it's a dialogue that we all need to have, because civic engagement is important to each and every last individual that's here in America. It's very important to all of us. So when we think of pre-clearance, like lock on the door, before Shelby County, if a state wanted to change its voting rules, it had to get the key from the federal government. After Shelby County, the lock was removed. States could do whatever they wanted, and voters had to go to court after the fact to try to undo the damage. Now, I want you to think about that. You, Mr. and Mrs. Everyday Citizen, you got to go to court in order to get this straightened out when, one, you can't afford to do that. Two, you go to the courts, and most of these courts are already biased, where they're also a part of this same thing. Yes, they're also a part of that as well. So depending upon what you look like is what the outcome was going to be. So think about, you know, you do everything that you're supposed to do. You're working, you're paying taxes, you're paying for your for the housing that you have, you're paying for food, transportation, you're doing what you're supposed to do, but they're taking away your rights. That's kind of like, you can't really weigh that, because the effects are so grave. And if the effects are like that, then what is it that you can really do? That's what you need to be thinking about. What can you really do when it comes down to voting? Because for those people that are representing you, if they're not doing their job, then that's a step that's already cut off. So then came Novick v. DNC in 21. The court upheld 2 Arizona voting restrictions, and this is the critical part. Made it much harder for everyone to prove a voting law is discriminatory under Section 2 of the VRA. They raised the bar for plaintiffs at the exact moment the bar needed to be lowered. You understanding that, right? So now it's like, it's jumping from regions, okay? We're going southeast, southwest, west. This is spreading. This is spreading like real bad cancer, a real bad wildfire. It's spreading. It is spreading. And so what are the people going to do about this? Because we have to actually be looking, we have to be noticing, and we have to be proactive. We can't be reactive. We have to be proactive. That's each and every last one of you've got to be proactive about this, because your right to vote is sacred. It means everything, not just for you, but for every person that's here in this country. So as that goes, after Shelby County, the only remaining tool was Section 2, the ability to sue and prove discrimination in court. Novick weakened that tool, so now the shield is thinner, the sword is duller, and the attacks keep coming. So now you have all these states, especially these southern states, that's from southeast to southwest, that's going up to the Supreme Court. They're fighting this, and they're getting their way. They're fighting this, and they're getting their way. They're changing voter registrations. They're purging people off voter rolls. They're doing everything possible to keep black people from voting. That's the whole premise. They're keeping black people from voting. So since 2021, at least 30 states have enacted over 110 redistricting voting laws. That is not a coincidence. That is a direct consequence of removing federal oversight. The Brennan Center's research is clear and is devastating. The racial turnout gap has been growing almost twice as fast in jurisdictions that used to be covered by pre-clearance. The umbrella was thrown away and voters of color are getting soaked. So I want you to think about that. I'm here in Metro Atlanta. Metro Atlanta, up to this point, holds more than 11 million people. There's more people in Metro Atlanta than there is in all of South Georgia. Let's think about that. Just Metro Atlanta itself, that's 8 to 11 counties, that has more people in it than all of South Georgia. Now, what that says is that when you got other counties that are just outside of Metro Atlanta, like Gordon, Macon-Bibb, they too have got a rapid growing population. So if they've got this rapid growing population and more people are registering to vote, you know what the problem is? The problem is those that have done all the fraud are now trying to find a way to control those that can vote them out of office. They want to hold on to that power. When you get power hungry, you got to keep that power because that power means everything. As long as I can control you, I'm good. It's when I can't control you. And when I can't control you, then I know I have no win. So this is not ancient history now. This is happening right now. And the legal architecture that protected your vote for 50 years has been dismantled. And the question is, what are we going to do about it? It comes right back to that same question. What are we going to do about it? Because we got to do something about this. Now, what I'm going to tell you guys, because this is the other part when I talk about the real thing is the economic impact. And the economic impact is, it's dire. And let me tell you how it's dire. Because as long as these people can continue to use Black people, get what they want, but also can strip rights away, they're very happy. They are very happy. So if they're very happy, then we've got to do something to change that. So let me give you this example, and this is what I was talking about, what I wanted to add to this. Is for most of you as of lately, you know that the NAACP has come up with what they call out of bounds. Out of bounds was was a message being sent to all the young men that are playing sports. That is from college football to basketball to baseball to track, whatever it is to stop going to these PWIs and go to an HBCU. I'm going to tell you 500%, I support that. I support that. You guys go to my blog, changingtrendsandtimes.wordpress.com. You guys will see the post I posted before the show. And in that post, I specifically state that from the economical perspective, if the parents aren't seeing this, you know the kids are not seeing it. In these SEC schools, that is schools from Alabama, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, Mississippi, LSU, Kentucky, Tennessee. Don't go to those schools. Take yourself to an HBCU, please, because those NIL dollars will follow you anyway, because they're coming to see you. They're coming to see you. So you have to recognize the power that you have in your hands, in your feet, in your legs, in your mind, in your whole entire being for the individual that you are. As hard as you've worked to go play college sports, doesn't matter what the sport is, you've come too far for someone to let someone use you the way they're using these athletes. Now, I want you to know these athletes that are going to these SEC schools, they're actually, sports has become such a phenomenon that most of the SEC schools, most, not all, most, and there's 16 of them. There's 16 of them. Of that 16, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's 10 to 12 of them that seats more than 100,000 in the stadium. They seat more than 100,000 in the stadium. Now, you had two things preceding this. One, the NCAA was making an enormous amount of money off the likeness of these kids, and these kids were not allowed to make not a single penny at one point for their own likeness. Now, what also preceded this, what I want people to understand, is that Ed O'Bannon sued the NCAA. He was a former basketball player at UCLA. This was back some 15, 20 years ago. He sued the NCAA. He won, but they did not rule that he could get a judgment against the NCAA. He won, but that was not enacted into what could happen in the NCAA. So now that things have changed and they've made so much money, now it's legal when they were illegally paying the players anyway. Now it's legal for the players to benefit off their likeness, and now they have to pay them. So now the players go to the highest bidder. They made this like a form of free agency when it's not. My whole premise to this is that all of you young black men that are going to these schools where they're making billions of dollars off your talent, you may see a few $1 million, but they're making billions of dollars off of you. And you don't see it in your mind that, yeah, okay, you can get a few $1 million, but what the hell? You can't even vote. Is that important? Is that important to you? Because what difference does it make if you saying, oh, you got the bag, but you're still considered not a citizen because you can't vote? That really don't make sense. It does not make sense, young men and young ladies. Money is not that important. And if it is, those same NIL dollars will follow you at an HBCU. You go to an HBCU, I guarantee you, if you're that big of a change player, then you could definitely make change. Go make the change. Why let these folk continue to benefit off your likeness and you can't even vote? Also, in that whole point where you still can't vote, now the schools that those representatives, they did go into the political spectrum in order to make sure that they had what they needed to have for them in those sports programs. But now when we're talking about your rights to vote, they can't do anything. But you're still playing for them. You're still controlled by them, but you cannot see the forest for the trees. Parents, you can't see that forest for the trees. That is definitely untrue that you can't make it to the NFL unless you go play for Alabama. That is not true. I'm gonna take you guys back to 1979, and you know that it was more repressionist and racist then than it is now. I want you guys to remember Doug Williams, draft pick out of Grambling University and HBCU, was the face of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers franchise. Doug Williams took the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to an NFC championship game where they lost that championship game to the Los Angeles Rams 9-3. He put the Buccaneers on his back and took them all the way to a championship game. Of course, he later wins a Super Bowl with the Washington Redskins, but he did that. Why is it that you guys find it so difficult to go to an HBCU? The way the NFL classifies that is that when you go into an HBCU, but you got a profitable PWI, they get the HBCU players in rounds 3 to 7 because they don't want to pay them that much more money. But if you guys now today go to those HBCUs, that changes that whole scale. That changes that whole scale. Because if they're not benefiting off you, I can't believe that you guys would just let them do this. But if they ain't benefiting off you, then that means that you've won and you've showed your power. You're flexing your power. Especially those of you down in Louisiana. When that voter gerrymandering thing that they did down there in Louisiana, there's no way I will partake in anything in that state. There's no way I could support the Saints or any other franchise that even comes out of that state, because that's well, I haven't finished with what I need to get to about what these folk are doing. But in Louisiana, that was the harshest voter right gerrymandering situation that took place of all of them. And also, don't forget, in the SEC, there's also Texas and Oklahoma too. Their two are a part of that. But ain't none of those schools went to this Congress or called their friend Donald Trump on the phone to tell him that this is wrong and they don't need to do this. None of them are doing that. That even goes to these NFL Southern franchises. The same thing. Yeah, the Miami Dolphins, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Atlanta Falcons, the Carolina Panthers, the New Orleans Saints, the Tennessee Titans. All of these franchises have black NFL players, and none of those players, just like you, the young college athletes, aren't speaking out and showing and flexing your power because they come to the stadium to see you. So you go to entertain them like Step and Fetch. They give you a penny and you keep dancing. When are you going to see your value? Do you even feel like you have value? Let me just say this, because, you know, if you guys that continue to go, especially these SEC schools and these college programs that are not supporting you the way you want to be supported. You go to these schools, they do something that totally infringes on your rights. It makes national news. What makes you think that we the people are going to support you when you couldn't even support your own right to vote? Is that a fair trade? Does that even sound about right? I think it does. I think it does. But what that also means is that you need to get up off your ass and you need to do what you need to do. You need to start using this. You need to start using this. Because a lot of you are not doing that. You're all looking at that one thing. I got the bag. I got the bag. You got the bag, but you cannot vote. What sense does that make? None whatsoever. And when we talk about influence, we're talking about influence of doing real things. I definitely agree with what the NAACP is saying when they say that. For some, hey, it may be hard. And it may be one of those things where they say, well, I don't want to do that. Okay, you don't have to do that. Nobody can break your arm and make you sign a paper and say what you're going to do. You do what you want to do. But the thing is, just think about this. As you go out and you continue to do those things, that means that you don't need the support of people like myself and others that look like you, because you feel like you getting a bag is everything. And if that's where you are, that's where you are. Just be frank and honest about that and do what you do. But all those situations that may occur with you along the way, because I can guarantee you, especially when you're going to a lot of these schools, oh yeah, there's definitely some issues. And when they do, their PR team puts you all over the media in the worst light whatsoever. But then you think that the community is supposed to come and save you. We're not doing O.J. Simpson again. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. So I suggest that each of you get your priorities together. Make sure that you are registered to vote. Make sure that you go and vote. I don't care who you vote for. Just go vote. We'll know who you supported eventually. We'll know. We'll know. But go vote. But if you're at a place that's like working in a place that, you know, I have rights, and some folk come in and they come jack you up right there where you're working at and say, oh, they violated my rights. Okay, they violated your rights, so what you expecting? Because that company is supposed to be responsible for you and holding you accountable like you hold them accountable. So if they're not being held accountable, what makes you think outside of that is going to hold accountability? I'm just asking you to be smart and rational, because that's not rational to think that somebody has to uphold you when you're doing everything that's totally wrong. Because I will tell you this, as we go through here on Changing Trends and Times, and you will see us every Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I can guarantee you the hard stories, the things that people find it hard to talk about, we're definitely going to talk about them, and we're going to highlight them. We're going to highlight them like nobody's tomorrow. Because as we continue to do this, what we're doing is we're making things right for you and every other individual that's out there. Because you are important, you are special, and you definitely deserve the best of what is there to be. But if you don't feel that way, and you feel like you always have to be a part of a repressionist regime, or a part of people repressing you and taking your rights away and that's how you feel valued, then that's up to you. I'm not going to argue with that. But if that's how you feel, then we just have to get out the way of that. We have to get out the way of that. I'm saying to each and every last one of you out there, I'm expecting for you all to do the right thing. And for y'all, those of you that know some of these young kids that continue to go to these PWIs, tell them to do this one thing for me. And I want you all to do the same thing. I need you to go to the website, changingtrendsandtimes.com. And when you go down, you're going to find resources. And the resources for this episode here today is, this episode is titled, oh Lord, where's my keywords? At any rate, this is titled, no, that's the wrong one. This is holding folks accountable is what we're doing here, and so that's what this voting rights is about. So I just want to tell you guys that just go to our website and look for resources. They'll be there. There will be an article as well as a case study, and the case study will tell you. This is the case study, and you will be able to get this, download this from my website. And I want you guys to make sure that you understand exactly what you're up against and how this is really affecting you. Because when I tell you it's affecting you, I really mean this is really affecting you in ways that you would not believe. The title that you'll find these resources under are Out of Bounds, Out of Bounds, What Voting Rights and Black Athletes and the Price of Silence Tells Us. So you guys need to be using your voice. You need to be making things happen. And you'll find for many of the series that we do, you're going to find an enormous amount of resources that's there, that's posted. We've done case studies, to make sure that we have everything in place for you, because I want to make sure that you have this. Make sure you get that case study in the article, because I promise you, in reading that and you understanding exactly what's at stake, you will know what's important and what's not. So, in closing, I want to thank you guys for being here and tell you that next week we will be starting a new docuseries, and that docuseries is going to be dealing with medical and healthcare, and it's a 5-part series that I think each and every last one of you need to make sure that you're checking in on that. I'll have, but seen on some episodes, I'll have, some guests on for a couple of segments. And definitely for what's happening now in healthcare, you guys need to make sure that you're abreast of that, and you need to know how to do what's best to protect yourself. So join us again next Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I am your host, Charles King. This is Changing Trends and Times, and we will see you guys next Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You guys have a great evening. Have a great weekend.